All right. All right, so we are recording. So this is after, we've had that nice little introduction. I really want to just introduce you a little bit to the landscape design profession and the different components that make that up. So there's a number of different professions that really have design as a component. So we're going to talk about those different paths, entry points, different types of projects we might work on, the scales of projects we might work on, look at the work outlook, look at what the kind of base pay is for landscape architecture, and then what are the education pathways if you decide to go on the full landscape architecture route. So I found this video, this is quite a few years now. What I love about this is that to me, it really captures the breadth of landscape architecture. My family is like famous, like they think I just pull weeds. They don't really understand what I do. So when I run into people like this, I send them this link. And I think you'll see these different scales of, it could be the neighborhood park or residential lot, all the way up to planning for global climate change. So we really run the gamut on what we do. So I'm going to run this quick video. You know what, I'm going to stop share for 1 minute because I think I have to make sure I share sound or you won't hear it. Okay, let's try that again. All right. And get rid of the ads. Okay, well, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I think it does a nice job at covering that breadth of landscape architecture and the many, many different pathways that you can go. And in, Southern California, we have lots of opportunity for all these kind of diversity in design. Let's see if I can. Okay. Okay, so one category of people putting together landscape designs is called a landscape designer. So typically a landscape designer is unlicensed, so there's no kind of qualifications needed by the state of California. And they are really relegated to work at residential conceptual design, so single family residential conceptual design, unless they're employed by a landscape architect or they're affiliated kind of with a licensed landscape contractor. And those allow them, more diversity in the types of projects that they can work on. And so there are a lot of really wonderful landscape designers out there. And there are landscape designers who have absolutely no training, who just happen to like gardens and are designing. So I think as you move forward with whatever pathway that fits for your goals, just be cognizant of keeping your skills up. You guys are already doing that. You're in this class, so you're already getting some foundational skills of design, and making sure we're not designing a problem for clients. There are professional affiliations available, and those have like design assessments and meeting competency standards. So locally, so first, this is the legal information. All of the landscape design profession is regulated by the Landscape Architects Practice Act, no matter what type of landscape designer or architect or exempt profession that you are. And this is that section that says specifically you are unlicensed, but you're allowed to prepare drawings for the conceptual design and placement of tangible objects for single family dwelling. So you're not allowed to do construction documents, and we'll be looking at what all that conceptual design versus construction documents means in this class. But no, there's a limited scope to what unlicensed people can work on, and that's because they don't want you to create a problem for the public. So this is the group that does have kind of a professional certification for landscape design. It is called the Association of Professional Landscape Designers. There is a San Diego chapter. And so, they do education events, and they certainly have that. Once you have an experience as a designer, you can submit to be an APLD designer, and you have a peer review type process. So it certainly, as you're going out and facing the public and showing your portfolio, it is a credential to have under your belt. And then there's landscape architects. So that's what I am. And so we get involved in a huge range of projects encompassing analysis, planning, design, management, and stewardship of the natural and built environments. We do require licensure. There is a 5-part test currently. So you take 4 national exams with different focus areas. And if you pass all of that, then you take the California portion. So it is a pretty rigorous testing process. And there is a professional affiliation available, and that they also kind of coordinate the national exams. So here's some of the information, again, out of this Landscape Architects Practice Act. If you're kind of trying to navigate all this, you can go on to that Landscape Architects Technical Committee, LATC, in California, and that's where all this is kept. There's links to it in this presentation, which you'll find online if you're curious about all the legal language. So up until, it's in the process of changing right now, and this is kind of exciting, but up until pretty much this point in time, you've had to have some educational training to be eligible to take the exams. So it's a 6 years of work experience, basically, and at least one of the 6 years needs to be an education credit. So candidates shall possess at least 1 year of educational credit. So our program at Southwestern, 2-year landscape architecture program at a community college, is considered 1 year of educational credit. So you do get a year of that experience if you graduate with the degree from unfortunately the certificate doesn't count, it has to be the degree. And the degree has to say landscape architecture, or else it is not counted. Right now, there's a big revision to this happening. They've been working on it for a couple of years now. There is going to be an experience-only pathway into the profession. I think it's 8 years of experience, and that's usually under someone who can vouch for you. And then I think there's going to be some credits for landscape, a C27 or other contractor license. So they're kind of trying to open the doors up a little bit. They're realizing there's areas like San Diego where there is not a 4-year program, and that it's an undue hardship for sometimes people to move to a different location to be in a university program. So they're trying to create some more pathways in, which I think is a good thing. And then we have the Landscape Architecture Professional Association is called the American Society of Landscape Architects. What's really nice is founded in 1899, so it's been around a while. They have a lot of support for students. And there is right now free membership for students. So you can go on to the ASLA National website, and you can select, like, I think it's our region and San Diego, and then you'll find some kind of a pull down menu about the student affiliate chapter. Doesn't matter at what college it's at. It's kind of moved around for a while. Cuyamaca had it, and then Southwestern had it, and then they tried to decentralize it, and it just kind of fell apart. But the good news is you can still join national and do that for free. That's going to give you access to the Landscape Architecture magazine, which has some really great case study, kind of following a project through design, and, ability to post resumes online and have firms see it. So if you're interested in that landscape architecture path, I would say sign up and become a student member. It used to be $50 a year for students. It's $500 for professionals, which is insane. So it's quite a good deal. And then we have landscape contractors. So typically landscape contractors were recognized for their role in installation of a design, but a lot of contractors have been getting training in design, and they're bridging over to be kind of a design build type contractor. So a licensed contractor can design a project he intends to build. So a C27 licensed landscape contractor, or probably a general contractor, can do the same type of design work that I'm doing, but he can only do it for projects that he is going to build. He can't do it for someone and then they put it out to bid. So that's what the design build, it's almost kind of an exemption for landscape contractors to do design. So that's the one caveat. They two caveats. They can only design a project they intend to build, and they may not use the term landscape architect. That is a state regulated term that refers to licensure. And so typically C27 is the type of license for landscape in California. Okay, and then this is the section of the code where it talks about landscape contractors exempt from the provisions of this chapter, may not use the title landscape architect. So, that's good news for those of you who are in the landscape construction industry and you're happy being there and you just want to keep adding those design skills. So they also have a professional affiliation. The California Landscape Contractors Association does have a San Diego chapter. It's a very active chapter. They do a lot of great training, a lot of the water auditing training and certified water manager training, things like that. So definitely check that out. I actually was a judge for their landscape awards this year. So the big awards events coming up in September, they're always very exciting to see the good work out there. But we got a very active chapter here in San Diego. So as landscape architects or designers, whatever you want to, people working at probably the full scale, not just designers who are working independently in their own firms. These might be the types of projects that we might work on. We could have commercial projects. Institutional would include like universities or hospitals or the zoo. I've worked on zoo projects. Those are considered institutional projects. Residential, of course. Ecological restoration projects. We've talked about that a little bit. I know a couple of you have an interest in that. That is certainly my interest and passion, and I do that type of work. Historic preservation. I would say a lot of this, I haven't done golf courses, but I've pretty much run the gamut on my projects because I am easily bored. Right now, I'm heavy into some historic preservation community action. We'll be talking about that probably next class for our little 15-minute discussion time. Skate parks. I've gotten to work with a group that professional skateboarders who one became a landscape architect, one became a civil engineer, and they have this firm that they design skate parks all over the world. And they're super fun to work with. So I've gotten to do some design work with them. Of course, golf course is a specialty design. That is another exemption because they want people like Jack Nicklaus to be able to design golf courses. So there's exemptions if you're a golf course designer. And so when we talk about scale of projects, so scale is almost like size. So small scale would be like a residential project. Medium scale might be a local park. This is kind of a really cool park over, I don't know if you've ever driven on the 15 south north and the south of the 8 freeway, and you go under that really long tunnel. This is what's on top of it. So this park called Terralta Park was actually designed to mitigate for the freeway cutting a very established community. So it was going to divide this community. So one of the mitigation or the offsets to dividing the community was Caltrans had to build this unstructured park that people could mingle and, not have to cross this big freeway to get from one side to the other. So it's actually a really interesting park because to build on structure like that, you have very shallow soil profiles and the trees are, you can see that the water gets turned down and sometimes they're a little water starved, but all in all, this park's doing pretty well, but a really kind of a difficult park. And at the time it was built, it was the only one west of the Mississippi. So now there's been some added in Texas like this, but pretty unusual park. And then large scale might be community planning. So, planning for how houses are going to sit on the land, what areas you can see the stream corridor running through are going to be protected as permanently designated open space. So I've done a lot of that work in my past. So I can certainly answer community planning scale projects too. So real quick, touching on the work outlook, because that certainly, is important as you're considering a path forward. In 2020, the median wage was $70,000 per year. That's a a national wage. It was higher in California. So this is national. This is how many landscape architects there are in the nation, and then how many there are in California. We've seen an increase over the last few years nationwide. So I guess they're now saying, okay, we have a 2% decline, but you know, people retire every year. So I would say 2% is not a huge decline. It's probably just stabilizing right now. But there will be jobs. It just won't be a huge growing profession, and it normally isn't when you look at only having in the entire state about 2,500 practitioners working in the state. So it's a pretty small profession. If you were to look at engineers, it might be civil engineers, there might be 13,000 in California. So we are a pretty small profession. So medium wage is about 70,000 nationwide. And then this is a breakout of California. Now you'll notice that if you're working for a private firm, it's about the same, 77,000. That's, you know, with some years of experience and probably licensure. If you're working in government, you get paid a lot more. So you can see they're pushing $100,000 a year. A lot of that has to do with work in government. It's not very creative and fun. It's reviewing other people's plans, but you get paid well for it. You can get involved in kind of city planning. And then, you know, at the lower end, you're seeing designers work and kind of supporting probably design at nursery centers and things. So that's kind of the range. You can see the vast majority of people, 87% of the industry is working in this private sector. So hopefully that helps you with your planning. And then these are just some education pathways. Again, I added this little footnote that this experience only pathway is supposed to be coming soon. They're in the process of finalizing that. The language is already out there. If you're interested in it, you can go onto the Landscape Architects Technical Committee website, and they have some public draft forms of the language. But more traditionally, a lot of people will transfer to a school. Ideally, it's a Landscape Architecture Accreditation Board, or LAAB school. There's only a few of those in the state of California. Pomona, Cal Poly Pomona, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Oh, I listed them. I don't even have to remember. There you go. There's the ones in the state. Whether it's bachelor's or master's. So the ones with the asterisk, like Berkeley, only their master's program was accredited when I checked a couple of years ago. So USC had an accreditation, and the last time I checked, they didn't keep it up. It's difficult to keep up. But this is going to give you the most bang for your buck related to experience. So I attended Cal Poly Pomona, a 4-year program at the bachelor's level. I received 4 years of educational credit with that degree. So that meant I only had to work 2 years full time to equal my 6 years of experience. So I worked 1 year before I graduated, and then 1 year after, and then I was eligible to take the test. And then another education pathway, again, we talked about Southwestern College gets 1 year credit, and then 5 years of full-time work experience. That equals your 6 years. And the ones in our region are Southwestern and Maricosta, are both landscape architecture programs. Cuyamaca is currently landscape design. They are working on resubmitting their program as a landscape architecture program. I don't think that's happened yet. It takes about 18 months as they start that process. But I can see they've renamed a lot of their classes to go that direction. And that's it for the lecture. Is there any questions on the lecture component? Okay. All right. So I'm going to go through a little lab tonight that is going to relate to Google Earth. And I'm hoping this isn't going to be too overwhelming for you. Let's see, I'm going to actually close Google Earth and reopen it. So let me know if you guys are having trouble with this. I've given you a link in the assignments to download Google Earth on your computer. Now I'm gonna go back to this screen and start sharing. This is a tool we use so much, and I'm gonna go through, why it's valuable as a tool. So I've obviously downloaded the program, and once you download it, you end up with this kind of, opens up and you see the globe start to spin. And it gives you a lot of like how to navigate, tips for using it once it's downloaded. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And I close this announcement out. So in kind of the design professions, we tend to work in plan view, which means it's almost like a bird flying over a landscape and looking down, right? So it's a direct overhead view. In Google Earth, the settings default to, as you zoom in, it starts to tilt the plane. So what I would like you to do is to go into the tools up here and options. And then you'll go over to the navigation tab. And you can see I've selected this little radio button that says do not automatically tilt while zooming. What that's going to do is it's going to lead me in plan view while I'm using the program. I think the default is automatically tilt while zooming. So that you'll notice as you start zooming, it will stop being in plan view and it'll start to tilt at an angle. So apply, I've got that, okay. So now I'm going to type in, I've asked you guys to think about some site where maybe you're aware of or you've grown up in the last, maybe in the last 15 years, and you've seen some major changes to that site. Probably you could go back, I think the historic view of this is as far back as like 94 in some areas. So you might be able to go a little further back. And I want you to think about that site that's changed. And what we're going to do is going to look at it in the latest aerial imagery. And I'm going to have you guys print a snapshot of it with a scale and a legend. And then I'm going to have you go back in time and look at it at some point in time and kind of document the changes based on this really incredible search tool that we now have. So I've been doing a lot of work at Friendship Park on the border. My past class has done some work down there. A lot of advocacy work on protecting some of the historic elements and the cultural use spaces. So I'm going to zoom into that area because it's kind of been my world for a long time. Oh, that's it. So of course, here's the border line between the US and Mexico. If you're not familiar with this park, you will be after probably the next class. So very southwest corner of the country. And Friendship Park initially was set up to be a binational park. So you've got this portion that was on state land. This was dedicated during the Nixon administration in 1971. All of this land, 800 acres of federal property. So this larger border field state park was given to the state for recreational uses. Post 9/11 in about 2006, 2008, the federal government came back, took this big swatch that's adjacent to the border wall and took it back as a big border fence construction project, and has been difficult in letting people through to this binational interaction area. You can see on the Mexico side, you've got this really robust park here. And then the US is like a militarized zone. So there's been a lot of community pushback on that condition on this side of the border. Heavily used park. People travel all over both countries, thousands of miles, to use this space to see their loved ones who can't cross the border. So lots of fighting for this space at the moment. So few things about Google Earth just to help you navigate around. One of my favorite things is that as you hover with your cursor, you can look down here and it's going to give you an elevation above sea level. So that really comes in handy as you guys are looking at sites or trying to look at an aerial imagery and figuring out if there's steep slopes on that. So you can see right up here by the entrance to the park, we're at about 53 feet above sea level. And if I were to go down by the ocean, now I'm at, 7 feet, 6 feet, 4 feet, I'm at sea level. So I can see that 50, it's a pretty significant slope. We've got 53 feet of elevation change down to the water line. So that's a nice little tool that will help you. We want to I'm in your assignment, I'm going to have you set up a legend. If I can remember where my legends are. Where are the legends? Save image. Oh, I think I have to go into the print mode and then I get the legend. So I can, yeah. So there, I'm in print mode now. Now I have the ability to save as a PDF. So when I do a PDF, it adds, I don't know if you can see this with everybody's kind of stacked up there, but there's a north arrow and a scale on it. And then I can just double click on this and I can say Friendship Park. And then I'm going to say, well, it's saying 2021, but I'm guessing it's an earlier view right now. Because I'm in the print mode, it's probably setting that as current, but we'll take a look once I go out of print mode. 2021 image, just a basic legend. So I'm saying it's Friendship Park and this was taken in 2021. And if you have Adobe Acrobat installed on your computer, it's real easy to print to a PDF. If you don't, I'm not sure. I'm hoping that you can print it to your, home printer and the bar and the north arrow will come out. I might have to play around with that a little bit. We use PDFs so much. That's my go-to program for this kind of stuff. If you're having trouble getting the scale and the north arrow, let me know at the start of the next class and we can look at that a little bit closer for those of you who don't have PDF installed on your computer. Or Acrobat, which is the higher end version of Adobe PDF. I believe that you guys have access to the whole Adobe suite as the college has a license. I'm going to have to check with Mark. I think Word and Adobe are available to you guys. CAD is certainly available to you guys. It's actually a lot of programs. I know if you're into mapping, the Esri GIS program is available. So I've got it set up. I've got my legend updated. I can see that I have a scale bar there. Let me go ahead and save my PDF and I'm going to save it to my examples. Save it right in here. So 20. Save it. And it is probably saved it in there. But just double check that it made it in there. I guess you guys won't see that because I'm not sharing that window. Okay, got my image. Okay, close that. All right, so now I'm going to escape out of that. I'm going to close out at this little X and I'm back in the mode. So see this imagery date, it was actually 2018. So I will go back and rename that view. So definitely keep an eye on what date that image was taken. And then I see this button over here. Oh, back to 1985 in this location. So I can go way back. All right, let's see what it looked like in 1985. Not much resolution in 1985. So when I hit that historic button, I hit this, this little window opens up where you have like a slider. So there's 1994. And you can see a more defined circle. There was a more of a park-like element to it. Still not great resolution in the 90s. Bullring wasn't there yet, which is kind of interesting. So you can kind of check out how your site has changed over time. Let's see. 2003, I'm starting to see some clarity. You can see there's this monument we'll talk about next week. You can see the shadow of it actually right there. And there's this lifeguard tower. You can see the shadow with the direction of the sun at this time of day. And there's a bit more trees, and you can see this lush green pathway system. You can see, it kind of really ties into this larger state park. In 2003, 2004, maintenance, lawns not being watered. They're still watering this area, so more maintenance happening right at that border wall. 2007, pretty much at this point, they're starting to limit access to this. And in 2009, the federal government comes back and starts construction of this secondary fence and limits access to it. So it has a drastic effect on this park over time. And you can see all the amenities get cut down and go away as these improvements come in. At the same time, Mexico is building these beautiful parks. If you've ever been to Friendship Park in Las Playas, it's an amazing, colorful, vibrant, well-used place. And here we have more and more of a militarized zone. So you can just see the kind of neglect and loss of the quality of the park over time. So I could go back, say I'm going to go back to one of these earlier versions right before they probably did the border fence. And it's still green. 2004, 2003, it looks like a park there. So I've got kind of the same view. Now I just have a view in 2003. I'm going to go and print again, Friendship Park. I'm going to say now I've got a 2003 image. Come on. Where are you? Come on. Where are you? Okay. 2003, I've got my same scale. So I'm going to go ahead and save that PDF. Say this is 2003.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
How did you make the map flat one more time instead of like having it curved?
Absolutely. Good question. I will show you where to set that setting one more time. So I'm going to escape out of this print mode. So I've kind of printed my two. I'm going to escape out of this history mode. It brings me back into current day. I'm going to print this one real quick again before I answer that question. So this is the 2018 image. Come on. Doesn't let me. Print. Oh. So I'm going to say this is okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to close out of this. And so that's kind of the overview of what I want you to do is think about a space where you've maybe seen or you've heard about significant site changes over time. It looks like it possibly back to 1985, but there's not a lot of clear aerial data. I would say 1994 is probably the limits of where you can get something decent to print. And I have pretty good coverage throughout San Diego. So think about a spot you can go and check the history on. Maybe a spot, maybe like I grew up on the edge of an old rancho land with rolling hills and oak trees up in Los Angeles. And when I was in high school, all the developers came in and they literally flattened out the mountains and tore out the trees and filled in the creeks and built miles and miles and miles of housing. And so there was this huge land transformation that I witnessed. So maybe it's something like that, or maybe something you've heard of that maybe like the flood improvements in Mission Valley. Maybe you work at one of the malls there and you want to see how the configuration of the river channel was prior to the improvements that happened probably 10 years ago now. So those, Qualcomm Stadium, I don't know if there's pictures large enough to show, Qualcomm is no longer there. That's a dramatic change to our landscape. So think of something like that. And so what I've asked you to do is to download this program and try and capture a couple of these snapshots. If you're not able to get the scale in the north arrow just by printing, just print out a picture. It's fine. I just want you to start thinking about scale and north arrows, but we'll get into that. Most important thing is that you get the picture kind of the same size and update the legend so that you can see the different times there. So start playing with that. And then I've asked you to just write a paragraph about those changes and given you a couple questions about why, and that'll be due in a week. So you have some time. We can talk about it next week if you're running into struggling with challenges. And I'm going to go back. Well, I'll just show you where you can set that default. You're going to go to the Tools tab up here. And at the bottom is Options. And Options is going to open up all kinds of different things that you can set. But you're going to go to Navigation. And then in Navigation, you're going to click the Do Not Automatically Tilt by Zooming. And that will prevent it from tilting. The default, I think, is automatically tilt by zooming. So you just want to click on that one to make that your default, hit apply and OK. And then you should just be able to zoom in and out and always stay in plan view. Okay. Any other questions that I can answer about Google Earth or that lab assignment for tonight or this week?
So I think from the Mac view, when I click on tools, it doesn't give me an area to press options.
Okay, so for Mac users, you might have to go on and Google how to set the navigation tilting. There's probably some setting. It's in a different location. I used a Mac only as far as the reliability for years to run the presentations. I can tell you a lot of the platforms that we use in kind of the engineering side of design, which landscape and architecture become part of, rely on that PC platform. So if you're on the graphic design, kind of creative desktop publishing, movie making, they tend to be on Mac platforms. Engineering, architecture and engineering tends to be on a PC platform. So I'm not the best help for figuring out how to translate that into a Mac. So I apologize.
That's cool. I actually found out it's in system. It's on Google Earth Pro preferences. If anybody else has a Mac.
Oh, great! I'm sure there's a couple people who do. All right. Anybody else have questions on that little lab Google Earth exercise? Okay. Well, that's good. I did also kind of tried to get you thinking about how to structure your folders and that creating a folder for the class. And when I'm taking classes, I tend to say like week 1, here's the material, or class 1, here's the material, class 2, and keep track of it that way. But so, keep good track of your digital files. That's always important to help find things. But you may want to sign up for a program like the free version of Dropbox. And there is a free version. You have to keep declining. No, I don't want to pay for anything. But what that does is it provides a mirror up to a cloud. So you work off of your desktop like you normally would, but you can set up a folder that it's synced to a cloud, so it's stored offsite also. So every time you hit save, it updates your drawing or your design or your plan or your folder, and it automatically updates it up to this cloud. And what I've seen happen and what I've experienced happen is working with some kind of big modeling program and just crashing the computer and losing the entire motherboard or hard drive. So in the design professions, a lot of times we're working with big files. So nice to think about how those are going to be backed up so that you don't have a nervous breakdown in the middle of your final project if you choose to start, especially doing some big modeling. So think about that. Maybe check out setting up a free Dropbox account, you know, and be conscious of how you're storing your work, because you want it for your portfolio going forward anyway. So you don't want to be losing it. All right. And I think with that, unless anybody else has questions, we'll go ahead and end this one.
I do have one last question.
Sure.
Is this site that we're picking for this project going to be used for future projects, or is it just for this one project?
It's really just so that you can start harnessing that tool of Google Earth and understanding how you can get both a contemporary image, but there's also a lot of data in comparing historic images. I will tell you that a lot of our reviewers at like city levels, if they're looking at a job site to see if somebody has illegally pulled out native plant material, say they go into these free platforms and they hit that history button and they say, 5 years ago, that hole was all native plants and now it's not. And you have to correct that all. So I think it's good that you kind of get fluent in some of these tools that are available and readily used. I would say, you know, when you pick your site, you might want to keep doing some of the projects. You'll certainly have times to explore things of interest, but it probably won't be one of the major design projects. It'll probably be more like, you know, we're going to look at hazard zone areas of like where there's risks of flood or landslides or fault lines. And so if you have a site in mind, you could keep going back to that same site for things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, it was nice to meet you all tonight. We will meet again at 5:30 on Thursday. The first 15 minutes I'm setting up as kind of a discussion time. In that video we looked at today, you actually got to see the progress drawings of the Highline Park in New York, which is a super interesting park. So we're going to be like kind of just reading about that park a little bit next time. I'm going to introduce you to more of Friendship Park in a talk that I just did last week on the history of the monument there, which plays into the border wall. And if you guys have if you get stuck in Google Earth, you know, I can help you get unstuck. That's what that time is for, just kind of a discussion. So those of you who are getting off of work at 5:30, you don't have to stress out. You can go sit in your car and get all synced in and join us and assume that the lecture will kind of get going usually about 15 minutes later. I didn't go through the syllabus because it's just long and painful. So I definitely read the syllabus. The important things to note are there is, I was able to not have to require a book, which is like the first time ever. So there's some great books in there that I tend to use those 3 throughout the program. Certainly the 2 most relevant ones are the graphics book that we use in LA 104. But if you don't have a background in graphics, that's going to be pretty handy to have as a reference. And it's very inexpensive. I think it's like $25 or $35. So that's a nicely recommended book to buy. The residential landscape architecture book, I really like that book. I studied with that book at Southwestern. I studied with that book at Pomona. It is geared for residential design, but I think he does the best job at kind of going through the process. I don't like the chronology of his chapters, so I tend to skip around a little bit. But I think it's a really valuable book for your bookshelf. We'll cover a lot of the material in the lectures of this class, so you don't necessarily have to buy it. It's certainly a nice to have. You don't need to have the most recent version, which is ridiculous at $180. It's just insane. But I would say version 4 or later, because there was a major sustainability update in the 4th edition. So think about getting that one if you see one for a good price or at a book fair or on Amazon Marketplace. It's a nice one to have as a reference. And then of course the drafting tools. So I did not go through all the pieces and parts. I think maybe next class I'll do that where we can go through all the equipment. I did set up some kits for you at Blick. There is a bit of a discount if you go through Blick. I do not get any part of that. They just nicely fold in a student discount right into some very basic materials. That's going to be really your important thing to get because you'll need that for drafting. You'll also need some kind of an edge to do a parallel edge, but we'll talk about the different options for that probably next time when we look at the equipment a little bit. But no, there's a nice starter package up Blick if you want to order it. All right, and you should have a flyer in this announcements, and then I think all but one of you got an email from me last week. So, okay. All right. Well, have a good night. Have fun playing with Google Earth, and I will see you Thursday.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Night.